The first shot came before anyone saw where it came from. It sliced through the damp morning air of Normandy with a sharp crack, echoing across the hedgerows like a warning that arrived too late. A Panther tank halted mid-roll, its engine still growling, its turret turning just a few degrees too slow. Then the impact hit. Metal screamed, smoke burst from its side, and in that brief, violent second, everything the German crew believed about the American Sherman tank began to collapse. You can almost feel the cold inside that steel hull, the confusion, the
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
disbelief, because just moments earlier they had been laughing. It was June 1944, not long after the Allied landings in Normandy. The countryside was thick with bocage, dense hedgerows, narrow lanes, and small fields that broke visibility into tight, unpredictable fragments. This terrain did not favor speed. It did not favor long-range gunnery. It favored ambushes. And on that morning near the village of Saint-Lô, a German Panther platoon believed they were the hunters. The platoon was led by Lieutenant Karl Brenner, a veteran tanker with experience on the Eastern Front. His Panther AOSF-A was one of the most feared machines in the war. Its long-barreled 75mm KWK-42 gun could destroy most Allied tanks at distances where return fire was useless. Its frontal armor was thick and sharply angled. It was, in German eyes, nearly invincible when used correctly. And compared to it, the American M4 Sherman was almost a joke. The Germans had a nickname for it. They called it the Ronson, like the cigarette lighter, because they believed it burned easily when hit. They mocked its high silhouette, its thinner armor, its tendency to explode if ammunition was struck. German crews had seen Shermans knocked out again and again. They had grown confident, too confident. Brenner's platoon had been ordered to move along a sunken lane just outside Saint-Lô to counter what intelligence suggested was a small American armored presence probing forward. 3 Panthers moved in column, engines rumbling, tracks grinding over wet soil. Visibility was poor. The hedgerows rose like walls on both sides, limiting sight lines to just a few dozen meters. Inside Brenner's tank, the crew was calm, relaxed even. They expected contact, but not resistance that could truly threaten them. Then the second shot came. It struck the lead Panther, not from the front, but from an angle, low and to the side. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but it was precise. The tank jolted, its driver instinctively braking. Brenner immediately ordered the turret to rotate toward the direction of fire, but there was a problem. No clear target. The hedgerows concealed everything. What Brenner didn't know was that a group of American Sherman tanks had been waiting, not charging forward, not exposed in open fields. They were hidden, positioned carefully, using the terrain the Germans believed was protecting them. At the center of that American force was a Sherman commanded by Staff Sergeant Walter "Walt" Jenkins of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division. Jenkins wasn't new to combat. He had learned quickly in Normandy that survival didn't come from having the biggest gun or the thickest armor. It came from positioning, coordination, and timing. His Sherman wasn't special on paper. A standard M4A1 with a 75mm gun. Thinner armor than the Panther, slower to penetrate heavy targets from the front. But Jenkins understood something that Brenner underestimated. The battlefield was not a shooting range. It was a puzzle. Jenkins had studied the terrain the night before. The narrow lanes, the gaps in the hedgerows, the angles where a tank could fire and then disappear again. He positioned his platoon accordingly, not in a straight line, not in open formation, but in staggered positions covering multiple angles. They were waiting for the Panthers to move into a kill zone, and now they had. The third shot came from another Sherman, hidden behind a hedgerow break. It struck the second Panther's track, snapping it with a loud metallic crack. The massive German tank lurched to one side, immobilized. Its turret swung wildly, searching for a target. But the Americans weren't where they expected. They were everywhere. Brenner realized immediately that this was not a simple engagement. This was an ambush, and a well-planned one. He ordered his gunner to fire at the last known flash. The Panther's gun roared, sending a high-velocity shell through the hedgerow. Dirt and leaves exploded, but no tank emerged. The Americans had already repositioned. Inside Jenkins's Sherman, the crew moved with controlled urgency. The loader slammed another round into the breech. The gunner adjusted slightly, aiming not for the thick frontal armor of the Panther, but for its weaker side. Jenkins gave the order. Fire. The shell struck the rear side of the lead Panther's turret. Not a perfect hit, but enough. Flames began to lick from the impact point. The German crew inside reacted instantly. But they were already at a disadvantage. They were exposed, disoriented, and they were being hit from multiple directions. You can almost feel the tension tightening inside those steel compartments, the noise, the heat, the smell of burning oil. The Panther was a powerful machine, but it required space to use its strengths. It needed distance. It needed clear lines of sight. Here, in the tight lanes of Normandy, those advantages were stripped away. Jenkins knew this. He had trained for it, and now he was using it. The fourth shot came from yet another Sherman, positioned further down the lane. It hit the immobilized Panther again, this time closer to the engine compartment. Smoke thickened. Flames grew. The tank was effectively out of the fight. But this moment didn't come from luck. It came from weeks of hard learning. In the early days after D-Day, many Sherman crews had suffered heavy losses. They had faced Panthers and Tigers head-on in open ground and paid the price. Reports from June 10th to June 20th showed multiple U.S. armored units losing tanks in frontal engagements where their shells simply bounced off German armor. Those lessons were brutal, but they forced change. American crews began adapting fast. They worked closely with infantry units who helped identify hidden threats. Engineers modified tanks with improvised hedgerow cutters known as rhino devices, welded onto the front of Shermans to break through thick bocage instead of exposing themselves on narrow roads. Radio communication improved, coordination improved, and most importantly, tactics changed. Instead of charging, they started hunting. Brenner now faced a decision. Stay and fight or withdraw. He chose to fight. He ordered his driver to push forward, to break through the ambush. The Panther surged ahead, its engine roaring, crushing small obstacles in its path. The idea was simple. Close the distance. Bring the powerful gun to bear. Force the Americans into the open. But Jenkins anticipated this. As the Panther moved forward, it exposed its side to another Sherman, one that had remained silent until now. The American gun fired at close range. The shell struck just behind the turret ring. This time, the effect was immediate. The Panther erupted in flames. The impact penetrated into the fighting compartment, igniting ammunition. The explosion inside was violent, contained but devastating. The turret hatch burst open as the crew tried to escape. Some made it out, others did not. What makes this moment even more important is how it reflects a deeper truth of armored warfare in World War II. The Sherman was never designed to outmatch German heavy tanks one-on-one. It was built for reliability, mobility, and mass production. By mid-1944, the United States was producing Shermans in large numbers, ensuring that units could replace losses quickly and maintain pressure on the battlefield. German tanks, on the other hand, were powerful but complex. Panthers often suffered from mechanical issues, especially during long movements. Final drives failed, engines overheated, maintenance was demanding. In a fast-moving battlefield like Normandy, this created vulnerabilities that were not always visible in technical comparisons. Brenner's tank was now the last operational Panther in the platoon, and he knew he was no longer the hunter. He reversed, trying to back out of the kill zone, but the narrow lane limited his movement. The hedgerows boxed him in. He could not turn quickly. He could not see clearly. And every second he remained, the Americans adjusted their positions. Jenkins didn't rush. He didn't charge forward. He didn't expose himself unnecessarily. He let the situation unfold. He let the pressure build. The final shot came after a brief, tense pause. You can almost feel that silence, that moment where everything slows down. Jenkins's gunner took careful aim. The Sherman fired. The shell struck the rear of Brenner's Panther, near the engine deck. Not the thickest armor, not the strongest point, but enough. Smoke poured out instantly. The engine stalled. The tank stopped. Brenner ordered his crew to abandon the vehicle. They climbed out quickly, retreating into the hedgerows on foot. In less than 10 minutes, the Panther Platoon had been destroyed. 3 tanks, considered among the most advanced of their time, taken out by Shermans that were supposed to be inferior. But the story doesn't end there, because across Normandy, scenes like this began to repeat. Not always with the same outcome, not always with such clean execution, but enough to shift perception. German crews started becoming more cautious. Reports from panzer divisions noted increasing encounters where American armor avoided direct confrontation and instead attacked from multiple directions, using terrain and coordination. By late July 1944, during Operation Cobra, this shift became even more clear. American forces broke through German lines near St. Lo using combined arms tactics. Tanks, in infantry, artillery, and air power, worked together in a way that overwhelmed even experienced German units. The Sherman, often criticized for its weaknesses, proved effective when used as part of that system. Back in that quiet lane, the wrecks told their own story. Jenkins and his crew didn't celebrate loudly. There was no time for that. They checked their surroundings, reloaded, stayed alert, because in Normandy, every hedgerow could hide another threat. You can almost feel the weight of that moment. The understanding that survival wasn't about pride, it was about learning faster than the enemy. The Germans had mocked the Sherman's thin armor. They had trusted in steel thickness and gunpowder. And in many cases those advantages were real. But war is rarely decided by a single factor. It is decided by how well men adapt. As the smoke cleared over the hedgerows of St. Lo, the wrecks of the Panthers stood as silent proof of a hard truth. Superiority in war is not decided by specifications alone. It is decided by decisions, by timing, by understanding. You can almost stand there, in that quiet aftermath, hearing the distant rumble of other battles, seeing the blackened steel of those once feared tanks, and realizing that sometimes the thing you laugh at is the thing that defeats you. Because on that day, in that narrow lane in Normandy, the Sherman didn't just survive, it adapted, it outmaneuvered, it dominated, and the myth of its weakness took a direct, unforgettable hit.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.